Hi, everyone. Welcome to the lecture that really begins our journey in biology. So what is biology? As you look at the photographs on this screen, you can see lots of types of living things. Over here we have chromosomes, and then we have a pea plant that's just sprouting, a green tree frog, a morel mushroom, a seahorse, a dog, and bacterial colonies. All of these things fall under the category of biology. So what does the word biology really mean? If we break it apart, it's easier to understand. Bio means life. Ology means the study of. So when you put the prefix bio with the suffix ology, you get the study of life. And all of these things are part of that study of life. So what is life? What does it mean for something to be alive, and what does it mean for something to be not alive? There are characteristics. I want you to take a moment, think about anything that you think of as a living thing. What characteristics do they all share? What characteristics would tell you that something isn't living? When I pull up each of the characteristics, I want you to think if the ones that you just thought of are on the list. One, made of cells. This is probably the most basic characteristic of life. There is nothing on Earth that is alive that is not made of cells. Based on a universal genetic code. Most people would say, oh, well, that means DNA, right? It does, but it can also mean RNA. Sometimes your simplest life forms are actually based on RNA and not on the double helixed DNA. Prokaryotes are really, really simple organisms, usually single-celled. Eukaryotes are what you're made of. You have eukaryotic cells. So those are the two different types, and each of them has a different genetic code. Grows and develops. Now, this can be like you. In other words, you can be born looking generally like your adult self, and you can get larger. Or you can do what a beetle does, and you can go through what are called instars. In other words, you start out maybe as an egg, and then you go through several different looks, and then you end up as your adult beetle self. Responds to their environment. This can go across a lot of things. This could be something like, oh, the temperature's dropping, I'm a tree and I'm going to drop my leaves. Or it could be, I'm a worm and you just poked me and I'm going to try to wriggle away. Or it could be something like you, where if you hear someone yell the word fire, you're going to try to ascertain where that is and exit the area. Maintain a stable internal environment. We're going to start to talk about this as homeostasis in a few lectures. So when you get to the homeostasis lecture, remember that that is maintains a stable internal environment. And we'll get into that a lot more as we move forward. Changes over time. This can mean that the organism gets larger. It can mean that the organism changes shape. But they are going to show some sort of change over time. For example, when one of the little whirly helicopters from a maple tree falls down and strikes dirt, that whirly helicopter changes into a maple tree over time. Obtains and uses energy. For heterotrophs, this means that they're going to eat. For autotrophs, it means that they're going to take the sun's energy and they're going to convert that into food using other inorganic materials. Reproduce. Reproduction might seem very simple, but we're going to talk about two types, sexual and asexual. And one of the most basic life forms and oldest life forms on Earth, the virus, is actually not alive because it's unable to reproduce independently of another cell. So each of these items comes together to help you discern whether or not an object that you're looking at is alive or not alive. Studying life at various levels. The molecular level. There is a moment in which life begins, and all of these here, they may be organic, like organelles and macromolecules, but they may be inorganic, like some molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles. Now, some of these levels end up falling better into other branches of science. So for example, subatomic particles and atoms are going to be much more relegated to the realm of physics and chemistry, along with molecules. Macromolecules and organelles is where biology really starts. And actually our third chapter is going to be on nothing but macromolecules. Now, it's not until you get into the next level where you see the cell. The reason that it's done in yellow is that this is the smallest living organism, a single-celled organism. And that single-celled organism is going to gather together to create everything that's above it. It's going to make tissues, which are going to make organs, which are going to make organ systems, which are going to make organisms. So from the cell to organ systems, this is all on the organism level. Once you get up past the word organism, you're talking about the ecological level. You're talking about more than one organism grouped together. So more than one organism of the same species is a population. A group of populations is a community. When you add in abiotic stuff like air and sun and rain, you end up at biomes. All the biomes on Earth, plus the atmosphere, plus what's going on underneath the ground, makes the biosphere. Here's all of that in pictures, because sometimes it's a little bit easier to look at that way. Let's start with the cell, the smallest unit that is alive. The cells gather together into tissues, tissues into organs, organs into organisms, organisms into populations, populations into communities, communities, finally abiotic stuff comes in into ecosystems, and then everything from the edge of the atmosphere to under the ground is the biosphere. Remember, this is science class, and so we just need to remind ourselves that we're going to be using the metric system. Why? Because basically every country on Earth, save the United States, uses the metric system. And some pretty disastrous things can happen, scientifically speaking, when we aren't all talking in the same units. And so since the rest of the world uses metric, scientists in America also use metric. What are the base units for metric? Meters for length, grams for mass, liter for volume, and Celsius for temperature. Now, we have to be able to convert. We won't do a lot of converting this year, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. Please make sure that you can do converting. There'll be some questions about it in your little Google form, but if this is something that you struggle with, please feel free to reach out to myself so that I can help you make sure that you have a very strong understanding of metric conversion, because it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. The mnemonic for remembering the order is King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk, or any other way that you'd like to remember it. The base units are the meter. Now there's two tricky things on this. Remember, anytime you have a single letter, it's going to be a base unit, M, G, or L. If it's going to be millimeters, it's going to be over here, and it's going to be a double M. This is the single M, this is the double M. And honestly, you're really never going to see decagrams and decigrams, so this distinguishing factor is of limited concern. Now, let's go through and do all of these together. Remember, M, base units. We're going to C, or centimeters. 1, 2 to the right. So my 3.8 becomes 384.0. Next one down, 16.7. We're going from grams to kilograms. 1, 2, 3 to the left. So 1, 2, add your 0, 3 to the left. We're going from hectoliters to deciliters. 1, 2, 3 to the right. Centigrams to milligrams. 1 to the right. You're going to do your learning checkpoint in the Google form. I hope that you learned a bit more about what makes things living and what makes things non-living. And if you have any questions on your Google form, make sure to ask.